Good morning, everybody. I want to thank everyone for coming here today. We're obviously here to talk about the so-called bill, criminal justice reforms. And frankly, with this kind of turnout, you can tell how important this is for all New Yorkers. I want to welcome Leader Flanagan, my colleague in the Senate, and the rest of his colleagues from the Senate for being here. And I want to proudly welcome the courageous women and men who have dedicated their lives and careers to the criminal justice system. The people you see here have spent years on the front lines protecting us, defending us, and keeping us safe, all the while putting themselves in harm's way. So now I want to introduce some of the distinguished guests we have here, and we're going to hear more from each of these distinguished guests. First, we have Washington County Sheriff Jeff Murphy, and he's the president of the New York Sheriff's Association. Give him a round of applause, please. We have the Suffolk County Sheriff, Dr. Earl Tulin, Jr. Give him a round of applause. Thank you, Sheriff. Rockland County Sheriff, Louis Falco. Greece Police Chief, Patrick Phelan, President of the New York State Association of Chiefs of Police. We have law enforcement. We also have district attorneys. We're pleased to have the Orange County District Attorney David Hoefler here, President of the District Attorneys Association of New York. And Mary Pat Donnelly, who was good enough to join us for our press conference a few weeks ago, the Rensselaer County District Attorney. Thank you for being here. Now, our conference and the Republicans in the Senate have been constantly warning people the consequences of this reform, so-called reform, for months. And we've heard from the other side. Some have dismissed it as politicizing the issue, fear-mongering, and sensationalizing. So let me be perfectly clear. When a 5-time bank robber is arrested and released and says, "I can't believe they let me out," what were they thinking? This is not politicizing an issue. When a young man in Suffolk County is tragically killed by a drunk driver and a 6-time felon says, "January 1st, the law has changed, I'll be out tomorrow and I'll come find you," that's not sensationalizing an issue. When a judge sees his authority taken away and says the legislature improperly interfered with the judiciary's capacity to fulfill its constitutional mandate, that's not fear-mongering. And when the legislators need a closed-door briefing to understand a bill they passed almost a year ago, that's not, unfortunately, governing. There's a new story. We see it every day. There's a new story coming out, a horrifying crime, an accused criminal released, or a victim searching for justice. Do we need a more fair and just system? I think we all would agree, yes, we can, and we're ready to work for that. But compromising public safety and undermining law enforcement is not an option. As long as that continues, we're not going to stand by and be idle. So I want to appreciate all the people that are here today and thank them. And I want to throw it over to my good colleague and friend, Senate Minority Leader John Flanagan.
All right, good morning.
Good morning.
I want to make sure everyone can hear us. Can you hear us back there? All right. I really want to thank Leader Barkley. He just ascended to his new position, but he's a veteran of state government. And he is someone who is a great leader already. I'm proud to partner with him. We see a ton of our colleagues here from both the Assembly and the Senate. And I want to be clear, these are all Republican members of the Assembly and the Senate. We stand with all of these uniformed personnel. We stand with all the people in law enforcement, first responders, victims, advocates, and we are here to speak about the abysmal failure that has befallen the state of New York. So it's important that we recognize a few things. I want to give a personal shout out to my sheriff from Suffolk County, Sheriff Earl Tulin, who is highly regarded, who comes here as an elected official, who comes here as a Democrat, who comes here as a law enforcement professional of the highest order. We have the audacity and temerity to actually listen to Sheriff Tulin, to listen to the chiefs of police, to listen to the not-for-profits who are out there for trying to protect victims. What happened last year, let's be clear, Governor Cuomo, the Senate Democrats, and the Assembly Democrats, they own this. They own all of it. Now they're trying to tell you that they didn't know about this. I see Senator Lanza right there. Senator Lanza engaged in a vigorous debate during the budgets last year, predicted every single thing that's happening right now, and unfortunately, he was right. And unfortunately, by hearing from all the people who are standing here with us, they have been right every single day. We said this was going to happen before the law was implemented. We predicted this was going to happen, and we were proven right. We don't want to be right. We want to be protecting our citizens, our constituents, our residents, our taxpayers. And by the way, I want to protect every one of these people who are standing here behind us. They put their lives on the line every single day to protect us and the people we represent. So again, I don't want anyone to mistake what we're talking about. The Democrats passed this, they were embracing it, they were standing up and being jubilant. And then they found out what actually is involved. You are less safe today than you were 6 months ago. You are less safe today than you were a year ago. There are people out on release who never should have been released or should have been given bail. Our judges have less authority and less discretion than they used to. There is something inherently wrong with that. We stand here today unified, and I repeat, unified, to talk about bail repeal. Let's be clear, bail repeal, not some half measure. I'm going to say it again, repeal. We can achieve reform, but you have to sit down, act like adults, negotiate, compromise, and some of it's going to be hard, and that's okay. We do all believe in due process. We believe in civil liberties. Leader Barkley, all of his colleagues, all of my colleagues, but my God, this could have been done right. Haste makes waste, and that's exactly what happened. Sneak it in the budget, and then have Democrats say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this was in there. They knew exactly what they were doing. We need to go back to the drawing table with the input of all these professionals who've taken time out of their lives and their schedules to be with us here today. And we are not giving up. This is the #1 issue affecting the people of the state of New York. We can talk about economic development, taxes, environment, all those kinds of things. If you're not safe, nothing else matters. If you have to worry about your home community and whether your children or grandchildren are going to be safe, that's not the way it should be. We want to stand with all these folks and our constituents and be their voice, because their voice has not been heard by the Democrats. With that, I want to introduce Sheriff Jeff Murphy, who, by the way, is an elected official and has to be responsive to the people that he represents. He has been outstanding, and you will have the opportunity to hear from him. Sheriff.
Thank you, Senator. I don't know if I could be as loud as the Senator. But we come here today united as law enforcement professionals from around the state. In early January, like many of the people you see behind me, I was concerned about bail reform and what it would bring. We feared that it would bring danger to communities, and that's exactly what has happened. So early on, I started a Facebook page called Repeal Bail Reform. In just 3 weeks, we had 165,000 people join that group. I think that's pretty indicative that people are afraid. They're scared what's going on in their communities and in their state. It also became apparent that we were unable to track so many cases that have happened around the state. The whole intent of that page was to share stories of people who are arrested, reoffend, and then are set free and then create or cause another crime. That was the sole reason that page was started. And it's done that, but we can't keep up with how many cases there are. That's the sad truth. Within 1 week, and as the Assemblyman said, within 1 week we saw a bank robber in Albany be released from custody after robbing a bank. And that set the tone for what was to come. Then we saw the serial bank robber in New York City who robbed 5 banks, as the Assemblyman said, and couldn't believe and exclaimed that, I can't believe they're letting me out. We saw the Burberry bandit who was in jail for robbing a bank be released. And yes, of course, he robbed another bank. And then there was other outrageous releases. A man accused of manslaughter for strangling his girlfriend here in Albany was released due to bail reform. A man being held in Syracuse for a shooting death of his girlfriend was released courtesy of bail reform. We've had one death attributed to bail reform is too many, but there'll be others if this law is not changed. In fact, Adil Gonzalez, an 85-year-old man in Brooklyn, he was stabbed to death on January 23, 2020 by a woman who was released under bail reform from a domestic violence case. An 83-year-old woman walking with a cane on the Lower East Side was attacked and robbed of her purse by a man with 14 previous arrests, including 6 prior robbery cases. Does that sound like a minor offense to any of you? No. She fought hard with the man, but he was released. What impact does bail reform have on our children? Well, in Chilai, New York, a man was charged with not a qualifying offense under bail reform, and he was immediately released. And by the way, that charge was unlawful surveillance. He was allegedly attempting to film a 9-year-old girl in her bedroom. He was immediately released. I've never thought in my 40 years in law enforcement I'd see somebody arrested for trying to film a 9-year-old girl in her bedroom and be released. In Ontario County, a man shared photographs of a naked female child, age 10. He was immediately released. In Catskill, a man allegedly had 508 charges of possession of sexual performance by a child. He faced 2,000 years in jail. He was released under bail reform. The list goes on, and basically there's an outrage every day. Some days there's multiple outrages. We have an opioid crisis in the state. Everyone agrees with that. Does it make any sense that a woman in Ulster County was released after selling a fatal dose of fentanyl to a person? Or the members of a Dominican Republic fentanyl ring were arrested with $7 million worth of fentanyl. They were immediately released, and 3 of those were in the country illegally. There are literally too many cases to keep track of, but we're certainly trying. We simply want safe communities, and that's the cornerstone of our careers. We've seen in New York City, we've been told to be patient, we've seen in New York City that this January there's been more serious crime this January than in the last 5 years. I think that speaks for itself. I appreciate everyone asking us to come here today. We want to be unified with a voice. We want to be wrong, like was said, but unfortunately, as each day goes on, we see more and more of these cases. We simply ask that we could sit down with the majority leaders and we can come up with a solution that's fair to the defendants and fair to the public. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, next I'd like to introduce the Sheriff of Suffolk County, Sheriff Errol Toulon.
I'd like to thank Sheriff Murphy for inviting me to speak today. I appreciate his leadership and everything that he's done for the New York Sheriff's Association. I'm Dr. Errol D. Toulon, Jr., and I'm proud to serve as a Sheriff of Suffolk County. Prior to assuming this role, I worked 25 years on Rikers Island, completing my career as a Deputy Commissioner of Operations. So I have over 30 years of law enforcement experience. All of us standing here today understand that there are some long-standing inequities throughout our criminal justice system. There are a disproportionate number of poor individuals and minorities in jail and prison throughout New York and the nation. But I am here to say that bail reform in its current form will not solve our problem here in New York State. I believe it is hurting the poor, minorities, and crime victims, and negatively impacting the quality of life of New Yorkers. I have long stated that we do not need to reform certain aspects of the criminal justice system, but our focus should be on deterring crime by doing the hard work of focusing on dysfunctional human services systems that are failing many of our state's residents. We are failing our children, failing the poor, failing our minority and immigrant communities, the very same people that bail reform advocates seek to help. Without appropriate intervention to address underlying criminogenic factors, these individuals will cycle in and out of our incarceration throughout their lives, and bail reform will do nothing to address the root of their contact with the criminal justice system. As a society, we have failed these individuals over many decades through misguided public policies and a lack of political will to tackle the complex human service needs of many of our residents. Bail reform must be amended immediately to give judges the discretion to determine whether bail is appropriate or not. Bail must be amended to ensure that dangerous, repeat offenders are not released from court back into their homes and communities where there's a potential for reharming victims and witnesses in the community. In closing, I hope the lawmakers will show some respect and due consideration for the thoughts and expertise being offered here today by sheriffs and district attorneys across New York State. Thank you and God bless you.
This one, you want to do the next one? Well, that doesn't sound like fear-mongering to me. Next, we have the Greece Police Chief, Patrick Phelan. He's the president of the New York State Association of Chief of Police. Chief?
Thank you. I think I can be as loud as Mr. Flanagan. We're both Irish. Today we stand here in a place where most things are about politics. We stand here with a message that has nothing to do with politics. Standing behind me, my brothers and sisters in blue, are Democrats, Republicans, Independents. We all get up every day with one mission: to keep our communities safe. That's why we're here, with a plea for public safety. That is what this is about. The laws made by this legislature has made New Yorkers less safe. We are less safe now than we were a year ago. It has made our communities more dangerous. New Yorkers all have one thing in common. We just want to be safe. Safe in our homes, safe in our schools, safe in our places of worship. They deserve that. We're willing to provide that safety for them. We're asking that the New York State Legislature give us a fighting chance. Give us a chance. Right now we're handcuffed. They've taken our ability to keep people safe away, and that's not right. It's not fair for their constituents, and it's not what they were elected to do. And if they can't change that, they don't belong here. Amen. Yeah. We're asking that reasonable people come to reasonable conclusions. The examples you've been provided are numerous, and there's many more. Common sense needs to be employed at some point. We believe that reasonable people can come to reasonable accommodations, and we hope that's what happens here. And if not, we'll see you in November.
Got to make sure I get this right now. Of course, we want to hear from our district attorneys. We are fortunate to have the Orange County District Attorney with us today. District Attorney Hoovler, thank you.
Thank you for inviting me today. It's high time that somebody puts victims and law enforcement first. Thank you. One would think in a state like ours, where diversity and voices matter, that a legislature could pass laws where everyone gets some input, where the people that are most affected get input. Not just a select few. Not just a select few. A few maybe chiefs or a few district attorneys. Everyone gets input into it. I hope that as we move forward, that everyone gets input in this. And when I say everyone, I mean Republicans, I mean Democrats, I mean district attorneys, I mean chiefs, I mean law enforcement, I mean rank and file police officers and their unions. They all need to be heard. Yes, the advocates need to be heard also, and defense attorneys need to be heard also, because we need to make sure we get this right. What we have now isn't right. What we have now amounts to a failure, and we need to correct it. We need to take some steps and make sure we correct it. One of those steps is allowing judges to do their job. If you're going to allow a judge to decide whether someone's guilty or innocent, or you're going to allow a judge to make an evidentiary ruling, then by gosh, allow them to make a decision on bail. Why are you taking part of their discretion and then giving them the rest of it? It makes no sense. Either you trust them or you don't. And people at the ballot box decide most of the time who they're going to trust. So the people have already spoken as to that. Finally, to all my friends that are here in uniform, standing up here, I used to be a police officer years before I became a district attorney. Their voices on what they think have to be heard, and they can't be heard after the fact. So I applaud everyone here today for listening to them, and I thank you for inviting me. Let's go for a safer New York and make some reasonable changes with some reasonable reform to make a fair system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, District Attorney. Great words. Now I want to introduce the Rensselaer County District Attorney, Mary Pat Donnelly. Mary Pat.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me here today. This is an issue that we have long been concerned about. We are 30 days in, and all of the concerns that the DA's Association and the law enforcement officers expressed starting last April have come to fruition. You've heard the stories about the offenders being released back into the community after the police arrest them. What you're not hearing is the emboldening character that is being brought about as a result of these laws. The men and women behind me can tell you that on the streets they're being told, go ahead, take me in, I'll be back out in an hour. We're seeing an actual change in the way these criminals are thinking. Bank robbers, they have a plan. They're going to rob a bank and they're going to get some money, and they're going to rob a bank till they succeed. Domestic violence abusers are saying to their victims, and we're hearing this from the advocates, go ahead, call the cops, I'll be back and I'll get you the next time. Drug dealers, they've got a B team now. They know when we come in and sweep them up, they're going to put the next group right in place. So our criminals are being empowered by this legislation, and I know that was not the intent of this legislation. And I know that the DA's Association and all these men and women behind me support what was the intent, which was to make sure that nobody sits in jail because they're poor, to make sure that nobody takes a plea before they have a chance to look at the evidence. We support criminal justice reform. We support the rights of the accused, but we need to do it in a way that prioritizes public safety, and that is not what has happened here. They need to call us to the table so that we can explain how this is happening day to day. Thank you all for listening. Thank you.
All right, I want to like to bring up our colleague, good friend, someone who's got decades of experience and who has actually negotiated criminal justice changes before they worked. They worked. I want to bring up Senator Pat Gallivan.
Thanks. We're 35 days into this disaster that we knew would happen. The facts are in. We know what the facts are. We see it each and every day in every nook and cranny of New York State, in every community, in urban areas, in suburban areas, in rural areas. People are being victimized by repeat offenders. Those that are taken off the streets for an hour or two and because of these laws are back out there to victimize again and again. This is not right. The governor in his State of the State said that government's first priority has to be to protect its people. New York State is failing in its fundamental responsibility. We need to pull this back today. We need to fix this, and we need to give judges the discretion back to consider what we should be considering first and foremost: public safety. New York is one of only 3 states where judges don't have the discretion to consider public safety when a defendant comes before them. We need to do that. We need to do it now, and we need to do it before it gets much, much worse. I want to thank everybody who's here today who are professionals, whether they're prosecutors, whether they're law enforcement officers, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, independents, or conservatives. They care about our community. They wake up every day and care about our community and work to keep it safe. And New York State government is failing them and not giving them the tools to do so. Time we did it is now.
Julio, to close, and we'll take one question. Thank you, Senator. Great comments. To close, we have Joe Giglio, who's spent a lifetime in law enforcement arena and has been our point man, has been tirelessly working on this bail reform issue. Joe, to close.
Thank you very much. We just want to give you the genesis of this. Let's start with what the police chief said. We're not here to be political, we're here to govern. We're here to do what's best for the people in our community. As you can see, this wasn't it. The next part of it is what comes next. The problem with this bill is it was rushed. And they have said, well, this was the best we can do. But nobody talked about a study that was done by OCA and published on February 11, 2019, when in fact we didn't pass this bill in the budget until midnight on March 31st and April 1st. Nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about what happened in New Jersey. We heard that the world wasn't going to come to an end. But the real fact was New Jersey took 3 years to do it. We didn't do any of that. New Jersey had funding. We didn't do any of that. Where's DCJS? Where's the training? Where's the training for these folks? Where is it? How do they protect themselves? You tell me. Every one of these people put their lives on the line every day for us. And nobody's telling us what to do. And when you call this bail reform, that's a misnomer. They took the whole criminal justice system and turned it on its head. This has never worked anywhere. It will not work here in New York. And in the meantime, victims happen every day, and victims have a life sentence. Nobody seems to worry about them. The victims are poor. Nobody seems to worry about them. Right now, the only thing we're concerned about is criminals. And at some point, they forfeit their right to live in a free and civil society. And we will do everything we can to change this, do bail reform right, make justice even, achieve the goals that I believe they had in mind. But give us some time and give us some time to implement it. We need public forums. We need the stakeholders telling us what's going to work and what isn't going to work. And that's the only way that we get to the same place. So we're ready to go out and do that. We've already done a lot of work. We're ready. We want change, and we want it now. God bless.
Thank you to all of our colleagues in law enforcement, to my colleagues in the Assembly and the Senate. And think about it. There's something basically wrong when a domestic violence advocate is meeting with a victim and they have to worry about whether or not their conversation is confidential. That's what this law has wrought. That's what happens when you don't seek the input of the professionals who are on the front lines every day. In this case, it's the old adage, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. The Democrats are not listening. We are more than willing to work on these issues. I want to thank Leader Barkley. And with that, any questions? No, whether or not it's an indictment of the whole system. This is a failure on the part of the Democrats who have one-party rule. They run both houses. They chose not to have any hearings. They chose not to seek any input. They chose to stick this in the budget. So I'll give you a quick recipe, and I think the leader and I can concur on this. Have public hearings. Have public hearings all across the state. Have this voted on separate and distinct, not part of the budget. It got stuck in the budget because they knew this was going to be tough. Do it on a standalone basis. Allow all these folks to have input. Allow all of us to be held accountable, because we are more than happy to do that. It's an indictment of how the Democrats brought forward this issue and acted hastily, and it's a failed policy.
And as I mentioned, totally agree. Repeal this law. Repeal bill now. Just let me quickly say, as I mentioned, doesn't it seem strange that the Assembly majority now has to go behind closed door and rebrief their members on exactly what this law does? Maybe if this was a standalone bill, we would have never had it. Maybe if we had public hearings, we might have never had it. If we took input from the law enforcement DAs that are here, maybe we would never had it. So it just seems amazing. A year later, they're going to brief their members exactly what this law does. We're seeing what it does, and it's creating a huge public safety concern.
We have no meetings today. We have some meetings planned in the future, in the near future, with some of the. I'm sorry. No. Democrats here right now. No. We'll go see if we can find some.
I'm not going to speak for them, but I'm sure they have an open door. They're willing to converse. They're willing to come here today. So clearly they want to talk about this issue, and I'd welcome any of our Democratic colleagues to join us here, join us in dialogue, join us in public hearings, whatever, so we can get this thing repealed and we can fix it going forward.
Karen, just Karen, February 12th, there is a budget hearing. Let everybody be put on notice. There's a budget hearing on February 12th on public protection. That's it. There was never any money put in the budget for this. There's a hearing on February 12th. They control the agenda. They control who gets invited. So let's see who they invite. Let's see the order of the speakers. If you invite the sheriffs and the DAs and the corrections officers and they're 39th and 40th and 41st on the agenda, you're sending a message that you don't care about what they say. February 12th, public protection. That's the first real public opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yes, there's been over 120,000 people involved in that Facebook, and clearly it shows the public outcry about this. So absolutely, we're going to get our message out there any way we can. We got to repeal, again, there's a public safety crisis. This law has got to be repealed and go back to the drawing board.
I'm so glad you asked that question. We had bipartisan interaction. We had bipartisan government. We didn't have one-party rule being shoved down our throats. Pat Gallivan, Andrew Lanza, I'm looking at Rob Ord, people who were intimately involved in negotiations where there was discussion publicly, where there was input sought from the people who would actually be administering the law. We did it the right way. We did it the right way by working together, not shying away from things. I will match what we did any time, any place with what the Democrats have done to date and what they're planning on doing now, which is nothing, nothing. Yeah, so.
Go ahead.
It's just the facts. You want facts, all right? The Senate, I can't speak for the Assembly. The Senate has passed approximately 120 bills. Not one on bail reform. Not one on criminal justice reform. They've passed over 400 bills out of committees. Again, not one on bail reform. Not one on criminal justice. And they are telling everybody this is a top priority. The only way you do that is you get it out on the floor. The first day we were here, we offered an amendment to repeal this. They all voted no. We gave them the golden opportunity, and they passed it up. They're not making it a priority because they don't care about it the way we do.
And we'll finish. Obviously, we think repeal is such a crisis in New York. The easiest way, let's repeal it now, go back to the drawing board. None of us here think that it can't be reformed somehow. Maybe judges' discretion, other things, but certainly the easiest, cleanest, fastest way to deal with it. Let's repeal it now, go back to the drawing board, have public hearings, do it in an open manner, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you.
So thank you. Yeah. Thanks, buddy.